can you pull up what I just sent you? Check this out. Peter, Dr. Pry, I don't know if you've seen this or not. So these are 11 luxury doomsday bunkers around the world, right? I mean, this is pretty weird, a little bit flamboyant, but one of them was very interesting. Keep going lower. Keep going lower, these different designs. Okay, so this one's a little bit too much. Fine. This one's in Europe, fully, okay. Yeah, that looks like that one movie with, what was that one movie with that one comedian years ago? From Encino Man. What's the guy's name?
Pauly Shore? Biodome?
Biodome. It looks like the Biodome. Keep going.
Pat just busted out a Pauly Shore
Survival condo. Keep going. Watch this one. Watch this one here. Watch this one here.
That's insane.
That's insane to me. It's going down. It's not going up.
Going down. It's got
the penthouse,
15 floors.
So the penthouse there would be the bottom floor. Think about that.
pH negative 15.
Keep going down. Keep going down. Keep going down. Trident Lake. Not familiar with this area, but there you go. That's another spot. Las Vegas underground shelter. Doomsday bunkers. Look at this one. They got a pool there. They got a little house. Keep going down. The Aristocrat. They got game rooms. Keep going lower. The Safe House. Keep going lower. Keep going lower. Keep going lower. Okay, that one apparently goes up. So those gates come up. This almost looks like from the movie Purge, by the way.
Or I Am Legend.
Or I Am
with
Legend.
Will Smith.
Yes,
yeah, where
yes.
He closes the window.
That's right. Keep going. Keep going a little bit more to see a couple other ideas. Okay, this is pretty interesting. This is bunk bed. So that's like a military model. Keep going lower. Keep going lower. Fix a point. Lower, 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 lower. Interesting shelters at the bottom. This is in West Virginia. Global Seat. Wow, go up a little bit. Where's that at? Where's that at? Global Seat Vault to Doomsday Bunkers. Huh. That's very interesting. Go a little lower. And Norway. That makes sense. We got Kai that would be prepared for something like that. So, Dr. Pry, to go back to somebody's listened to this and you said 3%. Okay. To be in the top 3%, you have to make $250 a year, $200 a year. That's what the 3% makes. Because 1% is around $450, $500. 20% in six figures. 3% you're around $250 a year to be able to afford something like this, right?
Give or take, yeah.
What are some places? Following up with your meeting that we had, I called a few friends, okay, who are to see what they would say. One of the guys I called on, who I'm going to have on the podcast, if he feels comfortable about it, he'll talk about it. He said, "Yeah, absolutely. I got a spot myself, and I'm ready for it." He says, "Do you know your favorite podcast you've done all year? You know which one it is?" He's asking me. I said, "No, who is it?" He says, "It's Dr. Peter Pry." You know how many people I've shared that with? I said, "I don't know." And by the way, this is a guy that's a very well-known guy. The people know who this guy is. He says, "That's a podcast everybody should watch because most people are not ready for it." I said, "Okay, now what? To put it in context, he's in his late 60s, early 70s, so he's living in a different phase of his life. But he said he's got a place in South Carolina. What are some of the common places that you're aware that people are buying, nuclear shelters or, doomsday shelters, whatever they call them? Is it specific or it's general? It can be anywhere.
I want to push back.
Please.
On this idea that the preppers we're talking about, that the 3% that we're talking about are the 3% of the wealthiest Americans. That's not true. The 3% who are preppers, are probably mostly people of the middle class and even lower income brackets, that do that. I suspect there are more of them because I think there's more common sense among the middle class and working class people than there is among the millionaires and the billionaires. I
actually don't disagree with you. I can see them being a little more paranoid than someone who's super successful.
Common sense.
And it doesn't also people who live in rural areas. And, there are a lot of Americans who supplement their income by hunting, to get protein because meat is so expensive. These are people who are still from that. They still have those pioneer virtues, that we were talking about, that used to be the virtues and the values that all Americans used to have up until about a generation ago when we started changing and becoming more trusting of the government and expecting government to take care of us. There are a lot of Americans, from working class and middle class backgrounds that still have the old-fashioned virtues that they inherited from their parents' generation, as did I. My father taught us to hunt and fish. He had never heard of EMP. But he did that because he had fed his family through the Great Depression by hunting woodchucks and fishing. And so that was part of preparedness. It's not just recreation. Similarly, now anybody, even people on a modest income can do something to prepare. Stockpile food, it doesn't cost a lot of money to stockpile, canned beans are very inexpensive. all kinds of foods that are out there that are very inexpensive. The more you stockpile, the better off you are. Have a medicine kit and know how to use it. Exercise some common sense. If you live in the middle of New York City, you might want to think about, where are there still places that have the old 1950s civil defense signs? What building has the deepest basement? So that if I was concerned about a fallout, and I don't want to stress that, we're so terrified about radioactive fallout. Actually, there's probably not going to be a lot of radioactive fallout, and that's probably not as big a threat as people are worried about, because the cities are probably not going to be attacked. The adversary would make a counterforce attack. Maybe we should be talking a little about the basics of nuclear strategy to educate people about what they're going to face. Basically, the worst case, one of the worst case scenarios, and this is a scenario I think that is being advocated to Putin right now as well. We didn't really talk about all the factions that are out there, but another faction are people who still believe in Field Marshal Vladimir Sokolovsky's approach that was written in the 1960s, and that any war, any use of nuclear weapons is going to escalate to an all-out war. So you might as well launch a preemptive first strike against all your adversaries, and take out the nuclear forces of Britain and France and the United States to win the nuclear war right off the bat, and go big. If you're going to go nuclear, you go big. This is the Sokolovsky theory, and I'm sure there are still people advocating that. That's why they've built up a first strike capability with their strategic rocket forces. And that's one of the reasons Putin has been talking about the Satan II recently, which is their new first strike weapon, okay? They've still got the Satan I, which is very effective. It could destroy probably well over 95% of our ICBM silos. But a Russian counterforce attack, there are two kinds of attacks we think of in nuclear strategy. One is a counterforce attack, where you're trying to disarm your adversary by destroying his nuclear forces. And then there's the counter-value attack, where you go after cities and industrial areas and the population centers. Almost certainly, they would, if they went big and the Sokolovsky faction wins out, they would execute the counterforce attack. They don't want to attack cities initially in that first wave, because you want to hold the cities hostage to force your adversary to surrender. And so what do they need to attack to execute a counterforce attack? They can do it with 500 warheads. This is the equivalent of 50 Satan I. 50 Satan I ICBMs could deliver 500 highly accurate nuclear weapons that would destroy the 440 ICBM silos and launch control facilities, the 3 strategic bomber bases, and the 2 ballistic missile submarine bases. And that would destroy almost all of our nuclear weapons, except for those that are on the ballistic missile submarines at sea, on patrol. Typically, we have a third to a half of the submarines at sea on patrol. It's more like a third these days because the Ohio-class submarine is so old. And that's about 400 weapons that we would have out there at sea, that we would have surviving. Now, what are you going to do with those 400 weapons? Go attack empty ICBM silos in Russia, vacant bomber bases, ballistic missile submarines that are no longer in port on their side, impervious deep underground shelters, and then you'll have no nuclear weapons at all left after you've used up those 400. And that will leave our cities open and exposed to attack, and we would have no recourse but to surrender or see our population destroyed. The logical thing, the reason we have the ballistic missile submarines on patrol is they are a secure reserve. They're not supposed to be used except to deter the adversary from attacking our cities. So that attack, you see, that'd be basically be able to if you pull that off and destroy our forces, it would leave them free to commit aggression against our allies and have their way with the rest of the world, and threaten our adversary cities and conquer the world that way. Except the United States would be saving our cities and at least be safe for the time, as long as we had those that handful of submarines on patrol out there. So that's how the logic of how a nuclear force would work. And because they're trying to limit collateral damage to the civilian population, the survival of our civilian population is an important strategic asset to them. They don't want to maximize casualties. They want to limit the casualties. Their object is to destroy those ICBMs and their silos, which are all located in very low population areas, by the way. The same thing with the Air Force bases. There's only 3 of them. And they would do things like do low altitude bursts when you're using your nuclear weapon, because this maximizes the overpressure, the blast effect, which is what destroys an ICBM silo or destroys a bomber base. But the blast effect, it's called an optimum burst height. Okay, the higher up you go, the bigger that and more effective that blast wave is, and this happens to be good from the perspective of limiting collateral damage to the civilian population, because as long as the fireball doesn't touch the ground, you're not going to get any or very little nuclear fallout and radioactivity. So the counterforce attack will not generate a lot of fallout and radioactivity. So people don't have to have nuclear bunkers or even worry about going into some deep basement in New York City if you happen to live in New York City. It's a good thing to do. It's a good thing to scout that out. I'm not saying you shouldn't have nuclear bunkers. I mean, if you can afford it, that's great. But what I am saying is that for the average person, or even people that don't have a lot of money, there's a lot of things you can do, little inexpensive things that would significantly increase your survival.
Such as
storing food, putting aside maybe 1% of your budget. How much canned food can you put away? Having a water supply, having a medicine kit and knowing how to use it. Do you have friends who have a place in the country so that you might be able to work out a survival plan with them where you're going to be able to get to them somehow?
So if you like this clip and you want to watch another one, click right here. And if you want to watch the entire podcast, click right here.